I'm Celeste, 34, standing in my childhood home in Oregon, where every creak of the floorboards echoes my father's laughter. This house, with its chipped blue paint and lavender-scented halls, is my heart's anchor. But my brother Nathan and his new wife Harper moved in, and now tension hums in the air. Harper's sharp glances make me feel like a stranger here, and something's brewing I never expected. Have you ever fought to keep what's yours? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe to join my journey. The morning sun filtered through the attic window, casting soft shadows across my sketchbooks. I sat at my desk, a chipped oak table I'd dragged up here years ago, trying to focus on a logo design for a local bakery. My laptop hummed, but my mind kept drifting to the sounds downstairs, Harper's laughter sharp and confident mingling with Nathan's quieter voice. They'd been living here for 2 months now, ever since their whirlwind wedding. I'd agreed to let them stay, thinking it'd be temporary, a way to help my little brother get back on his feet after years of bouncing between jobs. The house was big enough, I told myself, and Nathan was family. But the air felt different now, heavier, like someone had turned up the heat without asking. I stretched my chair, creaking, and headed downstairs for coffee. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, Harper's candles, not my usual black brew. She'd rearranged everything. My mugs were shoved to the back of the cabinet, replaced by her sleek glassware. I frowned, reaching past her stuff to grab my favorite cup, a faded blue one with a lighthouse Dad gave me when I was 12. It felt like a small rebellion using it under her new order. Harper was at the counter, slicing apples with quick, precise cuts. She wore a crisp white blouse, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, looking every bit the real estate agent ready to close a deal. Nathan sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, his sandy hair messy from sleep. "Morning, Celeste," he said, barely glancing up. Harper didn't turn, just kept slicing, the knife's rhythm loud in the quiet. "Morning," I replied, pouring coffee. "You guys sleep okay?" "Like a dream," Harper said, her voice bright but edged like she was performing for an audience. "This place is so cozy. Needs a little updating, though." She gestured at the peeling wallpaper, a soft yellow Dad had picked out years ago. I bristled but sipped my coffee, letting it go. She'd been dropping comments like that since they moved in, about the outdated sink, the scuffed floors, the clutter of my art supplies. Each one felt like a jab at the house, at me. I leaned against the counter, trying to keep things light. "It's got character," I said, smiling. "Dad always said it's a home, not a showroom." Harper snorted, a quick, dismissive sound. "Character's fine, but buyers want modern. You'd get a fortune if you sold this place." She glanced at Nathan, who nodded absently, still glued to his phone. My stomach tightened. Sell this wasn't just a house, it was where Dad taught me to draw, where we ate Sunday pancakes, where I found him slumped in his chair after his heart gave out. I opened my mouth to argue, but Nathan spoke first. "She's got a point, Cel. Real estate's hot right now." He looked up, his blue eyes meeting mine, the same eyes as Dad's. "Could set you up nicely." I forced a laugh, hoping it hid my hurt. "I'm good here, Nathan. This place isn't going anywhere." I turned to rinse my mug, my hands trembling slightly. They didn't know or didn't care that Dad's will left the house to me alone, a decision he made after Nathan's string of bad investments drained his savings. I'd never held it over him, but now, hearing them talk like the house was theirs to sell, a quiet unease settled in my chest. Later that day, I was back in the attic sketching when Maggie called. She'd been my rock since high school, the one who'd sit with me on the porch when Dad's hospital bills piled up. "How's it going with the newlyweds?" she asked, her voice warm but curious. I sighed, glancing at the door to make sure it was closed. "Harper's acting like she owns the place. She's moving stuff around, talking about selling. Nathan's just letting her." Maggie made a low hum. "That's bold. You need to talk to them, Celeste. It's your house. Your dad left it to you for a reason." "I know," I said, rubbing my temple. "But Nathan's been through so much. I don't want to start a fight." I thought of his failed coffee shop, how I'd lent him money I never got back. He was trying now, working at a hardware store, but Harper seemed to call the shots. "Set some boundaries," Maggie said firmly, "or she'll walk all over you." Remember when my sister tried to take over my apartment? I had to shut that down fast. I laughed, but it didn't reach my heart. After we hung up, I heard footsteps in the hall. Harper was carrying a box of my old art prints, ones I'd hung in the living room. "These are so eclectic," she said, setting the box by the stairs. "I'm thinking minimalist vibes down there. You don't mind, right?" My jaw tightened. Those prints were from my first gallery show, a milestone Dad had celebrated with me. "Actually, I do," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "Those mean a lot to me." Harper raised an eyebrow like I'd surprised her. "Oh, well, we can talk later. Nathan and I have plans." She walked away, leaving the box where it was. I stood there staring at it, my chest tight with something I couldn't name, anger maybe, or the start of something heavier. I wanted to believe this was just a misunderstanding, but Harper's casual dismissal felt like a warning. And Nathan's silence. That hurt worse. That evening we were invited to a neighbor's barbecue. I'd been looking forward to it, a chance to feel normal, to laugh with people who knew this house as mine. But as we sat around the picnic table, Harper leaned over to our neighbor Gregory, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's so nice to finally make this place our own," she said, smiling at Nathan. "Celeste's been a great roommate, but we're ready to settle in." Roommate. The word hit like a slap. I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. Gregory glanced at me, his brow furrowing, but Harper kept talking, oblivious or uncaring. Nathan laughed a nervous sound and didn't correct her. The table went quiet, eyes darting my way. I forced a smile, my face burning, and mumbled something about getting more lemonade. As I walked to the cooler, my heart pounded. Roommate. In my own house. The one Dad left me. I stood there gripping the plastic cup, feeling like the ground was slipping beneath me. I stood by the cooler, the lemonade cup cold in my hand, the chatter from the barbecue fading into a dull hum. My cheeks still burned from Harper's roommate comment, and Nathan's silence gnawed at me. I wanted to march back to the table, set things straight, tell everyone this was my house, my home. But I didn't. Instead, I slipped inside Gregory's house, needing a moment to breathe. The living room was dim with photos of his kids on the walls, a stark contrast to the upheaval in my own space. Back home, I climbed to the attic, my sanctuary. My sketches were spread out, half-finished ideas for clients, but I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the barbecue, the way Harper's words landed like a claim on my life. I pulled out my phone and texted Maggie. She called me a roommate, in front of everyone. Nathan didn't say a word. Her reply came fast. "That's not okay, Celeste. You need to talk to him. Now." I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Nathan made my stomach twist. We'd always been close, or so I thought. After Dad died, I'd been the one to sort through his things, pay off his debts, keep the house running. Nathan had been grieving too, but he'd drifted, chasing quick fixes, crypto schemes, that coffee shop that tanked. I'd bailed him out more times than I could count, never asking for thanks. But this letting Harper rewrite my place in our home, it felt like a line crossed. I headed downstairs, determined to talk to Nathan alone. The kitchen was empty, but I noticed something new, a stack of glossy real estate brochures on the counter touting cozy family homes in our town. My heart sank. Had Harper been serious about selling, I flipped through one, my hands shaking, and saw her name embossed on the back, Harper Reed Premier Realty. The idea of her profiting off my house, my memories, made my throat tight. Nathan walked in carrying grocery bags. "Hey, Sel," he said, setting them down. His voice was casual, but his eyes flicked to the brochures, then away. I held one up, my voice steady despite the churn inside. "What's this, Nathan? You guys planning something without telling me?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a habit from when we were kids, when he'd been caught sneaking cookies. "It's just Harper's work stuff. She's always got ideas." "You know," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry about it." "Don't worry?" I stepped closer, the brochure crumpling in my hand. "She's talking about selling my house, Nathan. My house. And you're letting her act like I'm some freeloader." My voice cracked, and I hated it, hated showing how much this hurt. He sighed, looking at the floor. "She doesn't mean it like that. She's just ambitious. Wants us to have a fresh start. You've got to admit, this place could use some work." I stared at him, the the brother I'd shared late-night talks with, the one who'd cried with me at Dad's funeral. "This place is home," I said quietly. "Dad left it to me." "Not us. Me. You know that." Nathan's face tightened, and for a moment I thought he'd argue. But he just shrugged. "Yeah, I know. Let's not make this a thing. Okay, we're family." He grabbed the bags and headed to the pantry, leaving me standing there, the brochure still in my hand. I went back to the attic, my chest heavy. I wanted to believe Nathan that this was just Harper's overzealous ideas, but doubt crept in. I pulled out the deed from my safe, a worn document with Dad's signature, my name typed clearly as the sole owner. I traced the words, remembering the day our family lawyer Renee handed it to me. Dad had been clear this house was my responsibility, my legacy. Nathan had been there nodding no objections. So why was he letting Harper act like it was theirs? The next morning I found a note taped to the fridge, written in Harper's sharp handwriting. "Celeste, we're splitting utilities now. Please chip in for last month's electric. Thanks." My jaw dropped. Chip in. For my own house. The note felt like a slap, a calculated move to push me out of my own space. I ripped it off. Crumpling it, my anger flaring. I wanted to storm into their room, demand answers, but I stopped myself. I needed to think, to plan. This wasn't just about a note or brochures, it was about my place in this house and my family. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep quiet. I called Maggie again, my voice low. "She left a note, Mags. Wants me to pay utilities. Like I'm a tenant." Saying it out loud made it real, and the hurt deepened, mixing with a growing resolve. "That's it," Maggie said, her voice firm. "You need to shut this down, Celeste. Check the deed, talk to a lawyer if you have to. This is your home." Her words echoed in my mind as I sat there staring at the crumpled note. I knew she was right, but the weight of confronting Nathan, of facing Harper's boldness, felt like a storm brewing, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. I woke up to the sound of boxes being dragged across the hardwood floor. My heart sank before I even opened my eyes. It was Sunday, my one day to sleep in, but the noise pulled me out of bed. I threw on a sweater and headed downstairs, the air thick with the scent of lemon cleaner. Harper was in Dad's study, his sanctuary, stacking his old car manuals and photo albums into cardboard boxes. The room with its worn leather chair and cluttered desk was where he'd spent evenings sketching engine parts or telling me stories about his first truck. Seeing her hands on his things felt like a violation. "Harper, what are you doing?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, echoing in the small room. She turned, holding a framed picture of Dad and me at my high school art show, her expression cool. "Organizing," she said, setting the frame in a box. "This room's a mess. We need space for Nathan's office. He's starting a new project." She brushed her hands on her jeans like she was wiping away dust from my past. I stepped closer, my pulse racing. "This is my dad's study. You can't just pack it up without asking." My eyes locked on the box where his books were jumbled, pages bent. I wanted to yank them out, cradle them like they were still part of him. Harper raised an eyebrow, her lips curling slightly. "Celeste, come on. You're clinging to this stuff like it's a shrine. It's just a room. We live here too." Her tone was light, but it cut deep, like she was dismissing my entire history. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. "This isn't just a room. It's his. And this is my house." My voice shook, but I held her gaze. She didn't flinch, just picked up another book and tossed it in the box. The thud felt like a punch to my chest. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his hair still damp from a shower. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. His eyes lingered on the boxes, and I waited for him to say something to back me up. He didn't. "Harper's packing Dad's things," I said, my voice tight, without asking. "Tell her this isn't okay, Nathan." He shifted, scratching his jaw. "Cel, she's just trying to make the place work for us. I need a space to focus. You know how hard I've been trying to get this new gig off the ground." His tone was pleading, but it felt like a dodge. He wasn't meeting my eyes. I stared at him, my throat burning. "You're okay with this? Her boxing up Dad's life like it's junk." I gestured at the stack of albums, memories of our family vacations. His proud smile at my graduations. Nathan shrugged, and that small gesture broke something in me. He was choosing her over me, over Dad. Harper stepped between us, her voice low. "You're being dramatic, Celeste. You're stuck in this house, living in the past. Maybe it's time you moved on. Let us make this place our own." Her words stung sharp and deliberate, like she'd been waiting to say them. She turned back to the box, dismissing me. I wanted to scream to tell her she had no right, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I turned and walked out, my hands trembling as I climbed back to the attic. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank sketch, my mind racing. How could Nathan let her do this? He knew what this house meant, what Dad meant. I thought of the nights we'd spent in that study, laughing over his old car magazines, promising to keep his memory alive. Now it felt like Nathan was erasing him. I called Maggie, my voice barely steady. "She's packing up Dad's study mags. Nathan's just letting her. I don't know what to do." My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. "That's crossing a line," Maggie said, her voice sharp. "You need to check the deed, Celeste. Remind them who owns this place. And maybe talk to Renee. She'll know your rights." Her words were a lifeline, but they also scared me. Confronting Harper meant confronting Nathan, and I wasn't sure I was ready to lose him. Later, I went to the garage to check on the boxes Harper had moved. They were stacked haphazardly, some labeled "Donate." My stomach churned as I opened one, finding Dad's favorite sweater, the one he wore every winter, folded carelessly. I held it to my chest, the wool still faintly smelling of his cologne. That's when I saw it, a letter tucked inside a book, Dad's handwriting on the envelope. "To Celeste," it said. My hands shook as I opened it, reading his words. "This house is yours. Stand firm, kid. Don't let anyone take it from you." It was like he knew this day would come. I sat on the cold garage floor, the letter in my lap, anger mixing with grief. Harper wasn't just rearranging furniture, she was trying to erase me, my dad, everything this house stood for. And Nathan was letting her. I didn't know how to fight this without breaking what little we had left as a family, but I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The hurt was too deep, the stakes too high. I clutched Dad's letter, the paper crinkling in my hands, and stood up from the garage floor. My legs felt unsteady, like the ground itself was betraying me. I tucked the letter into my pocket and headed inside, determined to confront Harper before she touched anything else. The house was quiet now, the afternoon light dim through the windows. I found her in the living room, hanging a sleek new mirror where my gallery prints used to be. The sight of that empty wall hit me like a fresh wound. "Harper, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. She turned her expression impatient, like I was interrupting something important. "You can't keep changing things without asking. This is my house. Those boxes in the garage. Dad's things aren't yours to move." She crossed her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her elbow. "Celeste, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Nathan and I are building a life here. You're acting like we're stealing from you." Her tone was patronizing, like she was explaining something to a child. "Maybe it's time you found your own place. You're stuck here living like a ghost in your dad's shadow." Her words landed like a slap, each one sharper than the last. A ghost. I'd poured my heart into this house, keeping it alive after Dad's death, paying the taxes, fixing the leaks. I opened my mouth to fire back, but Nathan walked in carrying a tray of drinks from the kitchen. He froze, sensing the tension. "What's this about?" he asked, looking between us, his eyes pleading for this to stop. I turned to him, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. "She's throwing out Dad's things, Nathan. She's telling me to move out of my own house, and you're just standing there letting it happen." I waited for him to say something, anything to show he was still my brother. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Cel, you're blowing this out of proportion. Harper's just trying to make the place ours. You don't need all this old stuff. It's holding you back." His words felt like a knife twisting deeper because they came from him. He wasn't just letting her do this, he was agreeing with her. I stepped back, my chest tight. Holding me back, "This is our home, Nathan. Dad's home. You were there when he left it to me. You know what it means." My voice broke and I hated how small it sounded. I wanted him to see me to remember who we were before Harper came into the picture. Harper laughed a sharp cutting sound. "Oh, come on, Celeste. You're 34 hoarding old books and sweaters like they're treasures. It's pathetic. Let us have a real home." She turned to Nathan, her eyes softening. "Right, babe. We deserve this." Nathan nodded, just a small dip of his chin, but it felt like he'd chosen her side completely. My throat burned and I couldn't look at him. I turned to the mirror she'd hung my reflection distorted in its polished surface. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, angry, hurt, alone in her own home. I walked out my steps heavy and headed to the porch. The air was cool, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I sat on the swing the one Dad built when I was 10 and pulled out his letter again. His words, "stand firm," felt like a plea from beyond, but I didn't know how. Harper's voice echoed in my head, calling me pathetic, and Nathan's silence was louder than anything she'd said. I thought of the neighbors at the barbecue, how they'd looked at me when Harper called me a roommate. Did they believe her? Were they talking about me now, thinking I was the one out of place? I heard footsteps and looked up to see Gregory, our neighbor, walking by with his dog. He paused, his face kind but curious. "You okay, Celeste? Saw you leave the barbecue early." His voice was gentle, but it carried a weight like he knew more than he was saying. I forced a smile, my hands gripping the letter. "Just needed some air. It's been a lot." I didn't know how to explain without sounding petty, but Gregory's frown deepened. "I heard Harper talking at the market yesterday," he said, his voice low. "Said you're living off Nathan's goodwill, that you're too stubborn to move out. People are starting to believe her." He shook his head. "I know this is your house, Celeste. Your dad was proud of you for keeping it." His words hit like a wave, washing away any hope I had left that this was just a misunderstanding. Harper wasn't just taking over my home. She was rewriting my story, turning me into a freeloader in the eyes of the town. And Nathan was letting her. The betrayal sank deeper, a raw, aching pain that made it hard to breathe. I thanked Gregory and watched him walk away, my hands trembling on the swing. Harper's words. Nathan's silence. The town's whispers, they were closing in, and I felt like I was drowning in my own home. I stood on the porch. Dad's letter still crumpled in my pocket, the weight of Gregory's words sinking in. Harper was out there spinning lies about me, and Nathan wasn't stopping her. My chest ached, but I couldn't hide in the attic anymore. I went inside, determined to face this head-on. The house was too quiet, the kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. I found Harper in the dining room, setting out wine glasses for a dinner I hadn't been invited to. Her confidence, her ease in my space made my skin prickle. "Harper, this stops now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You don't get to act like this house is yours. It's mine. Dad left it to me. You need to respect that." She turned her smile sharp as a blade. "Respect Celeste. You're living in a fantasy. You're 34, clinging to this crumbling house like it's your whole world. You're a leech mooching off Nathan's kindness. Get out or I'll make you." Her words were venom, each one slicing deeper than the last. She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound that echoed in the room. "Trespassing, in my own house. Try to make me Harper." My voice shook, but I stood my ground, adrenaline surging. I couldn't believe she'd go that far, but her hand was already on her phone, dialing with a smug look. Nathan walked in, his face pale. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. He looked at Harper, then me, his eyes pleading for this to stop. "She's done," Nathan Harper snapped, not looking at him. "She's out. I'm not living with her anymore." She held the phone to her ear, speaking clearly. "Yes, I need an officer at 142, Willow Lane. There's a woman refusing to leave our property." My heart pounded, a mix of fury and disbelief. I wanted to scream that this was my home, that I had the deed, but my voice caught in my throat. Nathan just stood there, his hands in his pockets, not saying a word. His silence was worse than Harper's threats. It was like he'd already given up on me. I felt the walls of the house closing in every creak and shadow, a reminder of what I was fighting for. I ran upstairs to the attic, my hands shaking as I unlocked the safe. The deed was there, its edges worn, but the words clear my name, Celeste Marie Dawson, as sole owner. I held it tight like it could anchor me against the chaos. Downstairs, I heard Harper's voice loud and commanding as she opened the door for the police. My stomach twisted. This was real. She was actually trying to have me thrown out. 2 officers stepped inside, their boots heavy on the floor. One was tall with a graying mustache, the other younger, her face stern. Harper pointed at me as I came down the stairs, the deed clutched in my hand. "That's her," she said, her voice dripping with certainty. "She's been living here without permission, causing trouble. She needs to go." The older officer looked at me, his eyes calm but searching. "Ma'am, can you explain your side?" he asked. I took a breath, my heart racing, and held up the deed. "This is my house," I said, my voice louder than I expected. "My father left it to me. I've got the paperwork right here." I handed it to him, my hands steady despite the tremor inside. He scanned the document, his brow furrowing while Harper's smirk faltered. Nathan shifted, his face flushed. "Sel, come on. Let's talk about this," he mumbled, but his words felt hollow too late. I looked at him. My brother, the one I'd shared this house with, the one I'd trusted. His silence had let this happen, had let Harper push me to this edge. I felt a sob rising, but I swallowed it, refusing to break in front of her. The officer handed the deed back, his expression softening. "This checks out," he said, turning to Harper. "Ma'am, you might want to clarify your claim." Harper's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find words. For a moment I felt a flicker of triumph, but it was drowned out by the ache in my chest. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about Nathan, about family, about everything I thought we were. I turned to him, my voice low but raw. "Why didn't you stop her, Nathan? Why did you let her think she could do this?" He looked away. His jaw tight, and the silence between us was louder than any words. Harper grabbed the deed from my hand, her nails brushing my skin, and I heard a small rip as she pulled. My heart stopped. That paper was Dad's promise, my proof, and she'd torn it. The room spun, and I knew this wasn't over. I snatched the deed back from Harper, my fingers brushing the torn edge, and my breath caught like I'd been punched. That small rip felt like she'd torn into Dad's memory, into me. The officers exchanged a glance, the younger one stepping forward. "Let's all calm down," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. But Harper wasn't calming down. Her face flushed red, and she pointed at me, her voice rising to a near shout. "You think a piece of paper makes this your house?" She spat, her eyes wild. "You're nothing but a squatter, Celeste, hoarding this place like a pathetic spinster. Nathan and I are the ones building a life here. You're just in the way." Her words echoed in the dining room, each one a fresh wound stripping me bare in front of strangers. I felt the officer's eyes on me, and my face burned with shame. I looked at Nathan, desperate for him to speak, to tell her she was wrong. He stood frozen, his hands clenched, staring at the floor like it could swallow this moment whole. "Nathan," I said, my voice cracking barely above a whisper. "Say something. Tell them the truth." But he didn't. His silence was a weight crushing the last shred of hope I had that he'd choose me, choose our family. Harper stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You're not wanted here, Celeste. Everyone sees it. The neighbors, the town, they all know you're just clinging to this house because you've got nothing else." Her words hit like a tidal wave, and I felt small, exposed, like the whole world was watching me unravel. I thought of Gregory's warning, the whispers at the market, and now this Harper painting me as a burden in my own home in front of the police. The older officer cleared his throat, holding up a hand. "Ma'am, the deed is clear. This is her property. You need to explain why you're claiming otherwise." His tone was steady, but Harper ignored him, turning to Nathan instead. "Tell them, babe," she said, her voice sharp. "Tell them how we've been carrying her, paying for everything while she sits in that attic doing nothing." Her lie was so bold, so blatant, it stole my breath. I waited for Nathan to correct her to say he'd never paid a dime for this house, that I'd covered the bills, the taxes, everything. But he didn't. He looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt, and muttered, "It's complicated. Complicated." The word echoed in my head, a betrayal deeper than any of Harper's insults. My brother, the one who'd climbed trees with me in the backyard, who'd promised to stick together after Dad died, was letting her rewrite our truth. I felt the room tilt my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The officers were talking, asking Harper questions, but their voices blurred into static. All I could see was Nathan's face, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the way he'd let her tear me apart. Maggie burst through the door, her hair wild from rushing over. She must have heard from Gregory, who was lingering outside, his dog whining softly. "Celeste, what's happening?" she asked, her eyes darting from me to the officers, to Harper, who was still clutching her phone like a weapon. I couldn't answer, couldn't find words. The shame, the anger, the heartbreak, it was too much. Maggie stepped closer, her hand on my arm, but even her warmth couldn't pull me out of this spiral. Harper turned to the officers, her voice rising again. "She's manipulating everyone. Look at her playing the victim. This house should be ours. Nathan's the one who deserves it." Her accusation hung in the air, and I felt like I was falling like the floorboards. I'd walked my whole life were giving way. Nathan's head dropped lower, and I realized he wasn't going to fight for me. Not now, maybe not ever. The deed in my hand felt like my only anchor, but even that couldn't shield me from the truth. My brother had let me become a stranger in my own home, and the whole town was watching it happen. The officers left their boots echoing on the porch, leaving a heavy silence in the dining room. Harper stood by the table, her arms crossed her face, a mix of defiance and shock. Nathan slouched against the wall, his eyes still avoiding mine. Maggie's hand was warm on my arm, grounding me, but the torn deed in my hand felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I looked at Nathan, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, but his silence was louder than Harper's accusations. I couldn't stay in this moment, drowning in their betrayal. I had to act. I turned to Harper, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You've got 30 days to leave. Both of you. This is my house, and I'm done letting you act like it's not." The words felt like stones dropping into still water, each one rippling with a strength I hadn't felt in months. Harper's eyes widened, but I didn't wait for her response. I walked past her up to the attic, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. In my office, I pulled out my laptop and called Renee, the lawyer who'd handled Dad's will. Her voice was calm, professional, cutting through the fog in my head. "Celeste, I'm glad you called. Let's go over your options," she said. I explained everything: Harper's takeover, the police, the torn deed. Renee listened, then said, "The deed is clear. You're the owner. We can draft an eviction notice today. It's straightforward, but it'll hold up." Her confidence was a lifeline, and I felt a spark of clarity. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for myself. By noon, Renee emailed me a draft notice, formal but firm, stating Nathan and Harper had 30 days to vacate. I printed it, my hands trembling as I read the words, my name, my address, my rights. It felt like claiming a piece of myself back. I went downstairs where Harper was rearranging flowers in a vase she'd bought, acting like nothing had happened. Nathan was in the kitchen making a sandwich, his movements slow, like he was carrying the weight of the morning. I set the notice on the dining table, the paper stark against the polished wood. "This is for you," I said, looking at Harper, then Nathan. 30 days. That's the law." My voice didn't waver, but my heart raced. Harper snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it, her lips tightening into a thin line. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice low, almost a growl. "You're kicking us out. After everything we've done for this place." She laughed a bitter sound and tossed the notice back on the table. "Nathan, tell her she's being ridiculous." I looked at him. My brother, the one I'd shared this house with through every season of our lives. "Nathan, you know this is my home," I said, my voice softer now but firm. "You knew it when you moved in. Why are you letting her act like it's yours?" He set down his knife, mustard smearing on the counter. "Sell." I didn't mean for it to get this far, he said, his voice low. Harper thought, we thought we could make this work. I just want a fresh start. His words stung not because they were cruel, but because they were weak. He was still dodging, still letting Harper lead. I shook my head, my throat tight. A fresh start doesn't mean taking what's mine. You can start over somewhere else. I turned to Harper. And you don't get to decide what happens here. Not anymore. Harper's face twisted, her eyes flashing. You think you're so righteous, Celeste? You're just jealous because we're building something real. You'll regret this. She stormed out, leaving the notice on the table. Nathan followed her. His shoulders slumped, not looking back. I stood there alone, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of power, like I was finally stepping out of the shadows. But it wasn't enough, not yet. I needed to make sure they understood this wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my life. I stood in the dining room, the eviction notice lying untouched on the table, its words stark against the polished wood. Harper's footsteps echoed as she stormed upstairs, Nathan trailing behind, his silence louder than her anger. My heart still raced from our confrontation, but a quiet strength was settling in, like a fire kindling after being smothered too long. I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for the person I'd let myself become, someone who'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. I walked to the living room where Harper's new mirror gleamed on the wall. It felt like a symbol of her takeover, shiny and out of place. I lifted it down, careful but deliberate, and set it in a corner. In its place, I hung one of my old prints, a watercolor of the Oregon coast Dad and I had painted together one summer. My hands shook as I adjusted it, but each hammer tap felt like a reclaiming, a small act of defiance. This was my home, my story, and I wasn't letting her erase it. Maggie called as I stepped back to admire the print. How'd it go? She asked, her voice tense with worry. I told her about the notice, Harper's fury, Nathan's weak excuses. Good for you, she said, her tone fierce. But watch out for Harper. I heard she tried to list a client's house without their okay once. She's slippery. My stomach dropped. List a house? I asked, glancing at the stack of real estate brochures still on the kitchen counter. Maggie's words sparked a new fear. What if Harper had already taken steps to sell my home? I hung up and grabbed the brochures, flipping through them. One had a sticky note with Harper's handwriting, 142 Willow Lane, great potential. My address. My house. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just been talking about selling, she'd been planning it. I sat at the kitchen table, the brochures spread out like evidence. My mind raced back to the past months, her comments about modernizing, her push to update the place. It wasn't about decorating. It was about staking a claim. I felt a surge of anger, not just at her, but at myself for letting it get this far. I'd been so afraid of losing Nathan, of breaking our family, that I'd let her walk over me. No more. I called Renee again, my voice steadier now. I think Harper's trying to sell my house, I said, explaining the brochures, the note. Renee's tone sharpened. That's fraud if she's acting without your consent. Send me those documents. I'll draft a cease and desist letter to her agency. We'll protect you. Her words were a balm, but they also lit a fire. I wasn't just defending a house, I was defending my right to exist in it. That afternoon, I started undoing Harper's changes. I pulled her curtains down from the living room windows, folding them neatly but firmly, and replaced them with the old lace ones Dad's mom had made. They were yellowed and perfect, but they felt like home. I moved her glassware back to a shelf and brought my mugs to the front of the cabinet. Each act was small, but together they felt like rewriting a story that had gone off track. I found a photo in a drawer one Harper must have taken down, a snapshot of Nathan and me as kids, standing in the backyard with Dad, all of us grinning over a lopsided birdhouse we'd built. I set it on the mantel, my fingers lingering on the frame. It hurt to look at Nathan's young, carefree face, knowing how far we'd drifted. I wanted to believe we could find our way back, but not like this. Not with him letting Harper tear us apart. As the sun dipped low, painting the walls golden, I heard the front door open. Nathan walked in alone, his face drawn. He saw the photo, the curtains, the print on the wall, and stopped. Celeste, he said, his voice soft, almost broken. I'm sorry. Harper, she pushed me. I didn't know how to stop her. His eyes met mine, full of regret, but I wasn't ready to soften. I needed you to stand up for me, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. This is my home, Nathan. You don't get to let her take it. I held his gaze, feeling the weight of years between us, love loss, and now this. He nodded just once and walked away. I stood in the living room, the photo on the mantel glowing in the fading light, and felt a quiet resolve settle in my bones. I was taking my home back one step at a time. The morning after I handed Harper and Nathan the eviction notice, the house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I stood in the kitchen brewing coffee in my lighthouse mug, the quiet broken only by the drip of the machine. The lace curtains let in soft light, and the watercolor print on the wall seemed to glow a quiet victory. But the weight of what I'd done, drawing a line with my own brother, sat heavy in my chest. I'd taken a stand, but what came next wasn't clear. I heard the front door creak open and my stomach tightened. Harper stormed in her heels, clicking on the hardwood, a cardboard box in her arms. She dropped it on the counter with a thud, her eyes blazing. "You're really doing this, Celeste," she said, her voice sharp but unsteady. "Kicking us out. After we've been keeping this place afloat?" Her accusation stung, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, like she knew her story was unraveling. I set my mug down, my hands steady. "You know that's not true, Harper. I've paid every bill, every tax since Dad died. This is my home." My voice was calm, but inside I was bracing for her next move. She opened her mouth and closed it, her gaze darting to the eviction notice still on the dining table. Nathan trailed in behind her, carrying another box. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. He set the box down gently, avoiding my gaze. "Cel, can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. I nodded, but my guard was up. I'd heard his apologies before, and they hadn't changed anything. Before we could speak, the doorbell rang. It was Gregory, our neighbor, with a couple from down the street, Ellen and Marcus. They carried a basket of muffins and a thermos of tea, their smiles warm but hesitant. "We heard about yesterday," Ellen said, her voice soft. "We just wanted to check on you, Celeste. Your dad would be proud of you standing up for this place." Marcus nodded, adding, "This house is yours. Always has been." Their words hit me like a wave of warmth, but also a pang of guilt. The whole town was talking, and I hadn't meant for this to spill out like this. Harper's face tightened, her arms crossing as she leaned against the counter. "Nice to know everyone's picking sides," she muttered loud enough for us to hear. Gregory shot her a look, but said nothing, his presence a quiet support. I thanked them, my throat tight, and they left after a few minutes, the muffins sitting untouched on the table. Nathan shifted, finally meeting my eyes. "I didn't want this cell," he said. "I thought we could make it work, all of us here. Harper, she got carried away." His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the boy who'd clung to me after Dad's funeral, scared and lost. But that boy was gone, replaced by someone who'd let his wife try to take my home. "Carried away," I said, my voice low but sharp. "She tried to sell my house, Nathan. She called the police on me. And you stood there." I didn't raise my voice, but each word felt like a stone I'd been carrying too long. He flinched, his hands shoving into his pockets, but he didn't argue. Harper scoffed, grabbing her box. "This is pointless. You're playing the martyr, Celeste, and it's pathetic." She walked out, leaving Nathan standing there, his shoulders slumped. I wanted to reach out to tell him we could fix this, but the hurt was too raw. I'd drawn a line and there was no going back. Later, I sat in the attic, my laptop open to an email from Renee. She'd sent the cease and desist letter to Harper's real estate agency, warning them about her attempt to list my house. "They're investigating her license," Renee wrote. "This could cost her." I felt a flicker of justice, but it was bittersweet. Harper's downfall didn't fix what Nathan had broken. I closed the laptop, staring at the attic beams where I'd carved my initials as a kid. This house was mine, but the fight to keep it had cost me something I couldn't name. The silence around me was heavy like the moment before a storm breaks, and I wasn't sure what would come next. The attic was dim, the late afternoon light barely reaching the corners where my sketches lay scattered. I sat at my desk, the email from Renee still open, her words about Harper's license investigation glowing on the screen. It should have felt like a win, but all I could think about was Nathan's face downstairs, the way his eyes had flickered with shame before he turned away. I wanted to feel strong, but the house felt too quiet, like it was waiting for something to break. Downstairs, I heard the front door slam. I went to the window and saw Harper loading boxes into their car, her movements sharp and angry. Nathan followed, carrying a suitcase, his head bowed. They didn't look up, didn't see me watching. Each box they carried out felt like a piece of my home being chipped away. Not because I wanted them to stay, but because it meant my brother was choosing to leave. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, my breath fogging the pain. I wandered to the kitchen where the muffins from Ellen and Marcus sat untouched. I opened the basket, the smell of blueberries sharp and sweet, and found a note tucked inside Celeste. "This house is your dad's legacy. We're here for you." The words were kind, but they deepened the ache. The town's support was real, but it couldn't fill the hole Nathan's silence had left. I set the note down, my fingers lingering on the paper, and noticed a stack of mail on the counter addressed to me. Utility bills all in my name but marked past due. My heart sank. Harper had been using my accounts, racking up debts she'd never mentioned. I called Renee, my voice low to hide the tremor. "There's bills here, Renee. Hundreds of dollars. Harper's been using my name." She sighed, her tone steady but concerned. "Send me copies. We'll add it to the case against her. She's digging her own hole." I nodded even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. The bills felt like another betrayal, a final twist of the knife. I'd been paying for their life here, and they'd let me think I was the burden. I walked outside to clear my head, the evening air cool against my skin. Gregory was in his yard raking leaves, his dog curled up nearby. He waved, then walked over, his face gentle but serious. "Heard they're packing up," he said, leaning on his rake. "You did the right thing, Celeste. Your dad always said you had a spine of steel." His words were meant to comfort, but they stung. I didn't feel strong, just tired, like I'd been carrying this fight forever. "Thanks," I said, my voice flat. "It doesn't feel like winning." I looked at the house, its blue paint catching the last light. It was mine again, but at what cost? Gregory nodded like he understood and went back to his raking. I stood there, the grass damp under my feet, and felt the weight of it all, the bills, Harper's lies. Nathan's retreat. I wanted to call him to ask why he'd let it come to this, but my phone stayed heavy in my pocket. Back inside, I found a letter on the hall table, Nathan's handwriting on the envelope. My name written in his familiar scrawl made my chest tighten. I opened it, the paper trembling in my hands. "Celeste," it read. "I messed up." Harper pushed, and I didn't stop her. "I'm trying to fix things. I'll call soon. No promises, no real apology, just words that felt too small for the rift between us." I folded the letter, my throat tight, and slipped it into a drawer. I couldn't read it again, not now. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin, and I stood in the hallway alone, feeling like I'd won the battle but lost something I couldn't name. The house felt lighter with Harper and Nathan gone, like it could finally exhale. I woke early, the morning sun spilling through the kitchen window, warming the old oak table. I sat with my coffee. The silence no longer heavy but soft like a blanket. The eviction notice was gone, replaced by a single daisy in a glass jar, one I'd picked from the backyard yesterday. It wasn't much, but it felt like a promise to myself to rebuild, to make this place mine again. I spent the day scrubbing the floors, the rhythmic scrape of the brush soothing my frayed edges. The wood gleamed under my hands, revealing scratches and stains from years of life, spilled juice from my childhood scuffs, from Dad's work boots. Each mark was a story, and for the first time in months I didn't feel like I was losing them. I was bringing them back. I paused by the window, watching the street where kids rode bikes, their laughter faint but bright. The town felt closer now, like it was rooting for me. Maggie came by at noon carrying a bag of gardening tools. "Thought we could fix up the backyard?" she said, her smile warm. We knelt in the dirt pulling weeds from the flower beds Dad had once tended. The soil was cool grounding, and as we worked, Maggie talked about her own plans, moving to a new apartment, leaving behind her family's drama. "You inspired me," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Standing up like that, it's big, Celeste." Her words settled in my chest, not as pride, but as a quiet acknowledgement. I'd spent so long avoiding conflict, thinking it kept us together, but it had only pushed me to the edges of my own life. Now, with Harper gone, I felt the space to breathe, to decide who I wanted to be in this house. We planted marigolds, their orange petals bright against the earth, and I thought of Dad's love for simple things: flowers, a good meal, a laugh with his kids. Later, I walked to the front yard where the mailbox stood, its red flag chipped but sturdy. Inside was a postcard from Nathan, no return address, just a photo of the coast, and a few lines in his messy scrawl: "I'm starting therapy. Trying to figure things out. I miss you." I read it twice, my fingers tracing the words. It wasn't enough to erase the hurt, but it was a start, a crack in the wall between us. I tucked the postcard in my pocket, not ready to reply, but not ready to throw it away either. I sat on the front steps, the concrete cool under me, and watched the sky turn pink. The house stood behind me, solid and still, like it was waiting for me to decide its next chapter. I thought of Dad's hands, rough from years at the garage, building this place for us. He'd always said home wasn't just walls, it was where you chose to stand. For the first time, I felt like I was standing, not just holding on. The air was crisp, and I closed my eyes, letting the quiet wrap around me like a memory. I stood up from the front steps, the postcard from Nathan still tucked in my pocket, its weight a quiet reminder of what we'd lost and what might still be salvaged. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. I walked to the backyard where the marigolds Maggie and I planted glowed under the fading light. Kneeling beside them, I pressed my hands into the soil, feeling its steady pulse like the earth was telling me to keep going. Inside, I wandered to the hallway where a small wooden box sat on a shelf, one I'd made with Dad in his workshop when I was 13. It was simple, a little uneven, and he'd called it perfect. I opened it, finding a single pencil inside its tip, worn from his sketches. I held at my thumb, tracing the faded wood, and thought of his voice, rough but warm, saying, "Make something real, Celeste." I hadn't drawn for myself in years, always chasing client deadlines. But now, with the house quiet, I felt a pull to create again. I carried the pencil to the attic and pulled out a fresh canvas. My hands moved slowly, sketching the outline of the house. Not as it was now, but as I remembered it: the porch swing swaying Dad's truck in the driveway, the windows lit with evening warmth. Each stroke felt like a conversation with him, a way to hold on to what mattered. I didn't rush. I let the lines take their time, like I was learning to take mine. The doorbell rang, pulling me from the sketch. It was Gregory, holding a flyer for a block party he was planning. "Thought you might want to join us," he said, his smile kind. "Folks want to celebrate you keeping this place. Your dad was a good man." His words wrapped around me, soft but solid, like the house itself. I nodded, promising to come, and as he left, I felt the town's warmth settling into the cracks Harper had left. Back in the attic, I sat with my sketch, the pencil still in my hand. I thought of Nathan's postcard, his promise to try. I wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but I could see a path forward, one where we might talk again, not as enemies, but as siblings finding their way. The house wasn't just walls and memories, it was a choice, a place to stand firm, but also to grow. I set the pencil down, the canvas half finished, and felt a quiet shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it wasn't all I was anymore. I walked downstairs, the floorboards creaking softly, and stood in the living room. The light from the setting sun spilled through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the walls. I closed my eyes, letting the stillness hold me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting to belong. The house was mine, not just in name, but in the way I chose to live in it. I breathed slow, the air warm and steady, and let myself rest in that truth. The house felt alive again, its quiet hum a comfort as I moved through my days. I woke early, slipping downstairs to make tea instead of coffee, a small change that felt like a nod to starting fresh. The kitchen table was clear now, no bills or brochures, just a notebook where I jotted ideas for new sketches. I'd started drawing again, not for clients, but for me, filling pages with scenes of the town, its crooked lampposts, the river glinting at dusk, the faces of neighbors who'd become my anchor. I spent mornings in the backyard tending the marigolds Maggie and I had planted. Their petals were brighter now, soaking up the summer sun. I'd sit on the grass, my hands in the dirt, and let my mind wander. I thought about the years I'd spent keeping this house not just for Dad, but for myself, a place where I could be whole. The fight with Harper and Nathan had cracked something open, not just pain, but a clarity I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't just the keeper of walls and floors, I was choosing what this home would mean. Renee stopped by one afternoon, her briefcase tucked under her arm. She'd become more than a lawyer, someone who'd sit with me over tea and talk about life. The agency suspended Harper's license. She said, her voice matter of fact. She's moved out of town. Nathan's staying with a friend working on himself. I nodded, stirring my tea, the news settling like dust. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet relief that the storm had passed. Renee smiled, her eyes kind. You did good, Celeste. You stood your ground. Her words lingered as I walked her to the door. I thought of the woman I'd been months ago, shrinking to avoid conflict, letting Harper's words chip away at me. That woman was still there, but she was softer now, less afraid. I'd learned to speak up, not with anger, but with a steady truth. The house was mine, not because of a deed, but because I'd chosen to fight for it, to make it a place of my own making. I started hosting small gatherings, opening the house to neighbors who'd stood by me. Gregory brought his guitar one evening, playing old folk songs, while Ellen served lemonade. Kids ran through the living room, their laughter bouncing off the walls. I watched from the couch, my sketchbook open, capturing their joy in quick lines. This was what Dad had wanted, not a museum, but a home that lived, that held people together. I felt him in the air, not as a ghost, but as a warmth, like he was nodding from somewhere beyond. One morning I found a new letter from Nathan in the mailbox, longer this time. He wrote about therapy, about untangling the mess of his choices, about missing our late-night talks. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, he wrote. Just a chance to try again. I read it on the porch swing, the wood creaking under me, and felt a small shift. I wasn't ready to answer, but I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into the wooden box with Dad's pencil. It was a start, not a promise, but enough for now. I walked inside the floorboards, warm under my bare feet, and paused in the hallway. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It held my sketches, the marigolds outside, the laughter from last night's gathering. I stood there, breathing slow, feeling the weight of the past settle into something softer, something I could carry. The hurt hadn't vanished, but it wasn't all I was anymore. I was building something new, one small choice at a time, and the house was holding me as I did. I started spending evenings in the attic, not just sketching, but writing too. I'd sit at my desk, the lamp casting a soft glow, and jot down thoughts in a worn notebook, things I wished I'd said to Nathan, questions I'd never asked Dad. It wasn't about answers. It was about letting the words spill raw and unpolished, like cleaning a wound. The house held me through it, its creaks and sighs a quiet companion. I was learning to live here not just as Dad's daughter, but as myself, someone who could bend without breaking. One afternoon, I walked to the river behind the house where Dad used to fish. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky, and I sat on a flat rock, my shoes dangling above the current. I thought about the fight with Harper, how her words had cut so deep, and Nathan's silence, how it had hurt even more. I'd spent so long holding on to this house to keep Dad close, but I realized now it wasn't just about him. It was about me choosing what to carry forward, what to let go. I started a small art project, inviting neighbors to paint tiles for a mural in the backyard. Ellen brought her kids, who smeared bright colors with their hands, laughing. Gregory sketched a tiny guitar, his fingers steady despite his arthritis. Even Renee joined, painting a single star, her smile shy but real. As we worked, I felt the house breathe with us, becoming a place not just of memory, but of new beginnings. I wasn't erasing the past. I was building on it one tile at a time. Nathan called one evening, his voice hesitant over the phone. "I'm in a new place," he said. "Working steady. I want to see you sell when you're ready." I listened, my heart caught between old love and new boundaries. "I'll let you know." I said, my voice soft but firm. I didn't need to rush. I was learning that family wasn't about clinging to what was, but about meeting each other where we stood, flaws and all. The lesson came slowly, like light creeping through a window. Standing up for this house taught me to stand up for myself, not with anger, but with quiet truth. It wasn't about winning or being right. It was about knowing what I could hold and what I could release. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to move forward, not for Nathan or Harper, but for me. We all carry homes inside us, places we fight for, and sometimes the hardest fight is letting go of the weight that doesn't belong. What's a moment you've had to stand up for your own truth? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. It's those connections that make this journey mean something. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to join me in more moments like these. Share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for carrying your own light. Here's to finding peace in the places that matter most.